let's take a closer look at the fraction sort activity. For lower grades, kindergarten and first grade, the students are purely going to be identifying if a certain shape is partitioned into halves or fourths, or if it's neither. So as they look at set A, they're going to see various shapes partitioned in different ways. So they will see here, this one is partitioned into fourths. So they would place that shape in the fourths column on their sorting mat. Okay, so what we're looking for is we're looking for that misconception of something like this, where students might think there's 4 pieces, so it must be fourths. However, we want students to recognize that in order for it to be considered fourths, they need to be equal pieces. So it needs to be partitioned evenly. Another example of one that may trip them up is one that looks like this. Okay, so we can have a conversation about what the shapes look like. They could even use some of the Play-Doh from another activity bag, build the shapes and try to prove that these are fourths. But it leads to a powerful conversation about the fact that not all fourths have to be shaped exactly the same way, because here we have it cut in half, and between you and I, each one is half of a half, so we know these are equal, they're just shaped a little bit differently. So the students will sort those on their mat. You can walk around and discuss the different shapes, have them explain to you how they knew where to sort them as you talk to the different groups as they work together. Okay. Set B is intended for second and third grade students. The fractions are written in word form purely because we want students to focus on the quantity and the part of a whole instead of trying to figure out fraction notation. Students are not introduced to fraction notation until third grade, so your second grade students will likely not have seen that yet or understand what it represents. So for set B, the students are basically trying to figure out if the fraction is less than 1/2, equal to 1/2, or greater than 1/2. They can use the Play-Doh and build the shape that is described and be able to determine, okay, if I partition something into fourths and I take 2 of them, are those 2 fourths less than 1/2 of the whole, equal to 1/2 of that whole, or greater than 1/2? And they can look at their model to determine that. So then they would take that card, they would recognize that when they partition a shape into fourths and take 2 of them, it's exactly 1/2. So they would sort it in the middle column and continue partitioning and sorting the rest of their cards. It's essentially the same process for older students, but 4th and 5th graders will use set C, and they are actually presented with fractions in fraction notation. So they can build a model and determine it that way, or they can generate equivalent fractions on their whiteboard in order to sort them. But essentially, as they work, you want to be walking around and asking them about their mental process so that you can check for misconceptions, not only about what fractions are and what they represent, but if they're placing them in the correct column on their paper.